Well, hello there. So today I want to talk about frustration, the real deal. Have you ever been frustrated? I mean, ready to pull your hair out, frustrated. I know I have. I know how you feel. It's stuff like, why won't you listen? Or, you call that queen? Or sometimes you just feel like, why does everything seem like, fall on me? Whether you're married, you can feel like that. Why does it feel like I'm doing everything? Or you could be a single mom and you can feel like, my goodness, there's just no help. I'm responsible for everything. And you can really become frustrated. Hey, this is Anita Gibson. I'm a coach, speaker, educational strategist, and the author of the book Starfinder. And I thought this would be an interesting topic for the day. So, what I have learned over these 30-some years being married and raising children is that frustration is a sign that we need to check our hearts. Let me say it again. Frustration is a sign we need to check our hearts. It's actually letting us know that something needs to be attended to in us. Frustration is like pain in the body. Have you ever had a really bad toothache? Well, really what that pain is telling you is there's something wrong there and it needs to be attended to. And frustration is the same way. For many, many years, I felt when I was frustrated that it was because of someone else or something else. But it took time for me to begin to understand whenever I am frustrated, it is simply a sign that something within me needs to be attended to. Even when what others are doing is wrong, my frustration is never about another person. It's always about what needs to be tended to in my own heart. So there's a scripture. It's in James. And it says this. It says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the trying of your faith works patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect. And that doesn't mean perfect, like never making a mistake, but more mature, complete, lacking nothing. And that's in James. And then it goes on to say, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all liberally. That means lots and without reproach, and it will be given him. And he doesn't smack us and say, what? You need help with that? That's not the God that we serve. And so I want to share a story with you. And it's a personal story, but I'm hoping that it will help you to understand a little bit more about frustration, because actually frustration is kind of complicated. Sometimes it's about control, and I don't like how things are going, and so I'm frustrated because they're not going the way I want them to go. Sometimes it's about lack of discipline or systems, so that our kids are just all over the place and we don't have like a pattern for you. When you get up in the morning, you do this and then you do that. Or sometimes it's about patience and not being able to just enter in to the situation that presents itself, to not be able to slow our lives down enough to be able to say, okay, God, what's going on here? What's happening with my child? But we have scheduled ourselves to such an extent that this has to happen and that has to happen. And if there's anything that goes wrong, there's like no breathing room for us to be able to take a moment. Good morning, Cynthia. Take a moment and just stop and slow down enough to see, why are we frustrated? What is it that really needs to be happening now? What does my child really need? And so it's very complicated. You have to get to the place where you understand that frustration is like a bell. Ding, ding, ding. When it rings, it's not the time to react to whatever's going on. It's the time to be still and ask God, what are you saying? And what do you want me to do? I remember a day when I was very frustrated with my husband. I could not get him to help me do much of anything. I mean, he was just lethargic and just didn't really want to participate in what was going on with the family. And I fussed and I fussed. And the more he laid back, the more I fussed. Until one day I realized that the type of man that he is, he's not going to fuss back at me. He's just going to become quiet and he's going to become still. And so I realized that my frustration has something to do with the way I was interacting with my husband. And so I talked to God about it, and he told me from, this point forward, if you can't say something good, don't say anything at all. And there's going to be a season when you're just going to go ahead and whatever needs to be done, I want you to do it with a good attitude. I want you to not complain about it, whether you have to pack up everything for vacation, or whether you have to handle all the finances, whatever it is, I want you to stop complaining. I want you to go ahead and do it as unto me. Hey there, Danielle. And so over time, I decided it was hard, because I was so used to correcting my husband and straightening things out and telling him what he needed to do. And so this, I had to back up and I had to begin to say, I got to practice saying things that are good. And there were lots of things that were good to say, but I wasn't focused in on them because I wanted it done, and I wanted it done my way. And so over time, my husband began to notice that I wasn't fussing anymore. I didn't come up to him and say, God told me, and I'm going to show you that I can be kind. I didn't say anything. I just started being kind. I let the grudges go. I forgave. I had no expectations. All my expectations came from God. And after a while, my husband began to notice, wow, something's different here. And he began to then see me doing stuff on my own, hanging up curtains or, trying to paint a wall, whatever it was. And I would ask him, is it okay if I, do this or that? I'm thinking about doing this or that. And he would say, yeah. But after a while, he was like, well, can I help you with that? Or let me do that. And it took time. But part of my frustration has something to do with me and not understanding that I was shutting him down by the way that I needed to have things in control. The same thing with my kids. Because I was this woman, this mom who needed to have things in control, sometimes I was frustrated about stuff that I didn't need to be frustrated about. Because if all I would be willing to do is open my hands and just relax and rest, then some of that stuff the kids were doing that was driving me crazy, it wasn't even important. It didn't even matter. Some of the stuff, if the next day you told me this is the last day you're going to have on earth with your child, they would not have meant anything. But because I had this need to have things done a certain way, I created this environment, this stressful environment in the home. I was stressed, I was frustrated, and I was frustrating others. And I have a friend who is, she's like a brain researcher. And one of the things she teaches, excuse me, is that if you're having a stress response, you're frustrated, you have a 90% chance of causing those around you to have that same stress response. So when you get frustrated, guess what it does? It causes others to also become frustrated. So I want to really encourage you today to remember that frustration is a bell that's going off. It's telling you that something needs to be attended to in your heart. And if you slow down enough and begin to count it all joy. I mean, I used to think that was the craziest verse ever. Count it all joy? How in the world am I supposed to count it joy when I fall into trials, when stuff goes wrong? And I finally began to understand, because the next thing it says is knowing. So once I began to know that God is doing something with every issue that is allowed in my life, because if he allowed it to come in, he has purpose for it. He's going to do something with it. I don't have to be frustrated. I have to remember that that frustration is that bell that's ringing, that's giving me the warning that something needs to be attended to in my own heart. And so the next time you find yourself frustrated or you end up with a problem, I want you, this is kind of a way to think of it, to think about how it would be if you called your girlfriend up and say, hey girl, guess what? She said, what? I have a problem. I am so excited. I just know that God is going to do something amazing with this problem that I am having right now. What? You don't have a problem? Listen, we can share this one. You know, God is faithful. He's going to give you one soon enough. Just wait on him. What if we began to respond to problems like that? Like, oh, yes, that's a big problem. So I know it's a big promise coming. I know God has a big provision, because I know the God I serve, he is great and he's going to take care of me. So I pray you have a wonderful day. And when frustration comes, because it will, now you know what to do. Love you guys.